So, welcome everyone. My name is Ekaterina Konovalova, and I oversee Martechify programming and events. So if this is the first time with you, thank you for joining us. We have forums, we have Martech chats. Check out our website, YouTube, and LinkedIn, of course, where we have a community of professionals who gather to share case studies, information about the latest Martech, AI, exchange with their discovery, what worked, what didn't work for their company. So this is our main goal is to build a community of Martech professionals. Some of them are executives, some of them are deep into Martech and are practitioners, some of them may be aspiring Martech professionals. So we have a wide variety of community members, and our goal is to provide a lot of educational information to our community. All right, so the topic of today's forum is Harness the Cloud, Accelerate Growth with Cutting-Edge Data Technology. We have two fantastic speakers today. Before I introduce, I think I should talk about our moderator. So Rich Herbst, the founder of Ascent Marketing and the founder of Martechify, will be moderating the discussion, and he will actually introduce Jeff and Priya. So Rich, please.
Right, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Martechify. We're glad you're here and excited to jump into this dialogue. I'd like to extend a special welcome to our experts today. We have Jeff Siegel, who is Director of Marketing Strategy at Cisco. Jeff has an extensive background in data roles, and today, in today's world, he's particularly deep on AI. So we're going to hear some fantastic insights from him around how to manage data and how to enable AI to take companies and marketing efforts to next levels. I'd also like to welcome Priya Gumpalli. She's an executive level player, recently with Walmart Connect, formerly Warner Brothers Discovery. Her background is in data. She's especially deep in building out data platforms and tools. Very versed in ed tech and martech. So welcome, Priya. Welcome, Jeff. We're glad you're here. And did I skip anything about your backgrounds that you'd like to mention?
Oh, you nailed it.
All right, we at least have a start. As we get into this session, each of our experts will be sharing out of their own experience, so we'll hear more about their personal work and backgrounds in that segment. Anyhow, for today, we're bridging from our last session, which was email marketing in 2025, how to adapt to evolving technologies and emerging trends, to today's topic, which is harnessing the cloud to accelerate growth with cutting-edge data technology. So we'll start with some framing. This will be a three-way dialogue with myself and our two experts. And then we'll move, as I mentioned, into some use cases and scenarios. Jeff and Priya will share out of their own experience. We'll have some more three-way dialogue and then wrap up and some Q&A at the end. As we have the live dialogue, if you haven't done it already, please open up the chat window on your screen and go to the Q&A section, because our Martechify team will be moderating an active conversation in the chat channel. So please ask questions as we go and share thoughts as we go. We'll pick those up and pull those into the main conversation. And at the end, either near the end or at the end of the session, we'll open up microphones for active Q&A. So stay tuned for that. But we would love to hear your questions and thoughts as we progress. And please let's use that chat channel well. So back on today's focus, harnessing the cloud with advanced data technologies. What do we mean by that? So I'm going to let our experts open up here, but a hint, we're not talking about the basic data that sits in your CRM or your automation platform or a traditional analytics platform. This topic today goes much deeper, and there's some very advanced technologies that are being applied. So let me kind of, if we can go back a slide, Gaba, let's go back a slide. Priya, Jeff, would you like to share? Like, what are we talking about when we get into when we're talking about cutting edge data technology?
I can go first. I think when it comes to data technology, one of the things that I really like to highlight and talk about is that there's so many like fun and interesting things that are going on in the marketplace that I'm really interested in too. But I think that it really comes down to some fundamentals when it comes to data. Really basic things that might not sound as fun, but are super important, like accuracy, consistency, completeness. Where data is stored, is it in silos or centralized? And so I think that's a really important area when it comes to making sure that the fundamentals are in place so that then you can go ahead and do more advanced things like analytics or even AI. So that's one of the things that I think are really important. And you mentioned earlier, my focus has been a lot on data platforms and data clean rooms. And I think this is something that can really help to protect things like data loss, data fidelity, so that in the end, you get in the ad tech and martech context, more effective campaigns with better outcomes and better results in the end and better ROI.
Yeah, Priya, would you say, let me just put a couple words out there for your reaction. We're really talking about the data that sits underneath or in behind the activation platforms like the CRMs, the automation tools. We're talking about consolidated data platforms that sit a step deeper.
Yeah, for sure. It's like, the data that you're collecting as a first party data that you get from your website or from your own properties, as well as like the third party partners that you're partnering with, just really making sure that it's, good quality and in a good spot so that then you can go on to the next kind of layer of data utilization, which is kind of doing something with that data and deriving some insights. So just really making sure that there's some good basics and some good data hygiene in place so that can enable the use of the business client facing use cases that we're really interested in.
Super good. Jeff, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I loved sort of the framing here, and I immediately gravitated to the idea where like we're talking cutting edge data technology here. Um, again, I think when we were all discussing this, like that's taking us beyond the world of CRM, MAP, kind of the traditional demand marketing data silos and practices that most of us are probably deeply well versed in. But that said, I actually think that something that Priya said really resonates too is like, you're never going to get to cutting edge data if you don't get the fundamentals right. So I think that's got to be rooted in everything we always think and talk about when we decide to go after the next shiny object, the next really cool thing at that cutting edge. But if you get that right, I think that we're getting to a world now, and hopefully, we're going to talk a lot about this today, is like where once you have those fundamentals right, we're starting to think past those silos. Where does marketing act as a data platform, as a function? Where does all that data come together? Sort of as Priya mentioned, behind those platforms, how are we taking all of our data and turning it into really usable jet fuel for not just marketing, for all of go-to-market? And I think that that's the piece that marketing is kind of getting towards that cutting edge of, all right, we have strong platforms. We hopefully have really good data practices there. We've refined our processes at that level. How do we start to now take all that data out of those platforms and really federate it across go-to-market and use it to power the next iteration of how marketing, sales, CX all can work and work together. So I think that to me is where, as we think about cutting edge data, that's the big piece. Is we're basically cutting through those platform silos and really talking about how does marketing think more technically around acting as in some ways, a massive data lake itself to power the rest of the work.
Yes, and I will mention just a couple names, just for if in case anybody's wondering. So, we're going to hear today some illustrations around Snowflake as a technology platform. And be aware that there's very advanced tools inside of AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, and then there's also a whole spectrum of technologies that surround those kind of platforms and enable it. So there's really a lot there. We'll get into that as the conversation progresses. But now let's just talk about, I thought it would be helpful to raise kind of, just kind of prime our thinking, if you will, via some questions. So what are the tougher questions that marketers and go-to-market organizations face that call for more of these more advanced solutions than the traditional tools? So I'll just rattle these off, and then I'll invite our experts to build. So how do we harness all the data needed for advanced marketing and customer experience? How do we make the data AI ready? How do we enable real-time activation? Technically very challenging. Got to move a lot of data very fast to get to truly real-time. How to make the right data and the right insights available to the right and key stakeholders when they need it. Priya is going to leap on this one, I believe. And then how do you manage all of this? And we're talking about a lot of data movement. How do you all manage all this in a safe and compliant way? Priya, Jeff, any builds on this?
Sure. I mean, I'll dive right in. Obviously, that first question, I kind of already teased into that a little bit more there. I think, again, as we think about these large questions, it really does come down to marketing is accessing a huge wealth of customer engagement data. Like, as we think about that vast body across all those systems, I think that, you position it very well here. How do we harness all of that? And that's where, as we get to some of these more advanced systems like AI or real-time activation, if you don't have that centralized data repository, or at least a well-federated data infrastructure, a lot of these other pieces become really hard. You can't make it available to everybody if you can't access it. So I think that thinking about things like, you mentioned Snowflake, how do you develop a good centralized platform that allows data to be easily consolidated, accessed, and shared, but do it in a way that you can then actually also maintain control over that data, so you don't wind up with replication, people transforming your data, wondering what the heck that number or result or target audience came from because it's gone through 18 permutations before it made its way out there. I think all of that's super important. So something like a Snowflake platform where, hey, I can open up views instead of just having to ETL a table completely. There's a lot of opportunity for good design to help bring that data all together to enable sort of these other bullet points here. But, just kind of popcorning this around, Priya, what are your thoughts? Because I know you've been working a lot to help bring data together behind the scenes and then build kind of new front ends on top of it.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that, talking about the right data, going back to kind of what I was saying earlier, it's really helpful to have. And I think, the nice thing is that data is coming to the forefront even more than before in previous years, and the importance of data and the influence of it. So I think having a lot of good data teams and resources so that they can support, making sure the data is the correct data and the most useful data. And then technologies and platforms that are available today, like data clean rooms, which I'll be talking a bit more about, they're very powerful in terms of giving you transparency and control, and just making sure that the data is going to the right place, and that only a select few have access to the data and how it's being treated and what's being done with it and the insights that are being derived from it. So I think there's there's the data piece and the technology piece, but of course, clean rooms, I wouldn't really call them a new technology anymore. But what I would say is that I think there's quite a lot of folks in the industry that are fairly at the beginning of their journey in terms of the spectrum. And so I think that there's a lot to learn there. There's a lot of business conversations that need to happen about what are the goals and objectives that we have, what are the outcomes that we're expecting. And then, of course, that factors into the technology and it gets baked in such that the platform can deliver what it's expected to deliver.
Super good. Let's move ahead a slide. And we're touching on this a little bit already, but can you just share a bullet point or two? What is the end game here? What are we trying to achieve? Your thoughts?
From my perspective, from an ad tech and martech perspective, I think really the end game is a strong consumer experience, right? Like there's the commercial side, which of course, we want to be very mindful and thoughtful about serving up advertisements and campaigns that are considered helpful and valuable, right? And then what we want that to translate into, that it's a good consumer experience, that they do continue to want to view ads. In some instances they don't, but I think that if they can end up being like giving somebody the right ad at the right time, it can be something helpful for them, and so that contributes to a good experience. So in my mind, I think yes, there's a lot of the commercial side where we're building these products and businesses, and we want to utilize all these kind of data and technology capabilities. But I think in the end, we really need to, the outcome is that we want our consumers to take some action, to purchase something. And so backing into that, we need to make it sure it's a good experience for them.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I love that, the idea that always, from a marketing perspective, a go-to-market, the customer comes first. I think, playing on that a bit more, definitely on the end game, if I put my futurist hat on for a second there, I think that we're going to see a massive transformation over the coming years because of what data, AI, these kind of broader, more cutting edge technologies are going to do to go to market. I think we're going to see a very different way that we organize and operate as functions inside of a business to drive those customer experiences and revenue. And ultimately that broader interconnected web of data with things like AI sitting on top of it, and real-time experiences, streaming data capabilities. We're going to see the ability for organizations to engage at far greater scale with the resources available. It means that there's a lot more opportunity for a brand to get out there and engage meaningfully at the right touch points for customers, where today we're often, we have our hands tied behind our back because of budget, limitation of touch points, limitation of systems that we can actually really meaningfully connect through. And that's going to allow us to really optimize our customer journeys. I think on the back end too, we're going to see that productivity within go-to-market functions as roles and everything and organizations shift is really going to supercharge. So again, allowing that greater scale of how do we engage and how do we do so relevantly. So I think that the next few years are going to be very exciting, and at the heart of it all is the idea of, are we really thinking about those cutting edge data practices? Because if you don't do that right, all of that promise is kind of just words on a slide. So I think that there's going to be a lot of great opportunity in the coming years where good data practices, good data strategy is going to open a lot of doors for all of us in marketing. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but it's going to be very exciting.
Super good. Let me play back what I think I'm hearing here for you guys' reactions. So on the one hand, we have massive data available. Like if we're thinking about, we want to understand our customers, understand our prospects, and elicit some real actionable insights about each one of them, there's mountains and mountains of data available. So certainly there's the data. But then if the game is that we want to really enable some precision in putting the right message, the right offer, the right communication, the right personalization in front of each of those folks, it's a whopping big challenge. You've got to, it implies a lot of data intelligence being brought to the picture. And if you're talking about this massive mountain of data that's available to do it, the only way you're going to get there is tools like AI and more advanced data platforms. Traditional analytics approaches, traditional data warehouses can't even get started on this. So I'm seeing that as kind of the impetus. Sound right, or did I miss something?
I think it's a daring world in front of us, and you nailed it.
Super good. Super good. Well, okay, good. And I'd like to then move a step forward and just hear you guys' thoughts around, like, in your work, what are the kinds of things you're taking on right now? What's hot? What's relevant right now in your world? And we can move ahead one slide here. But yeah, what's relevant in your world right now? What's hot on your mind?
Yeah, I can. So I mean, I think we're about to dive into them all, but I mean, for me, it's definitely AI that consumes a large portion of my week, and how it is connecting into the broader strategy of marketing as a function, and then how are we partnering across go-to-market. So I know we're about to dive into that a bit more, but that's definitely eating up many cycles of my brain every day.
All right. How about you, Priya?
And just to add to that, kind of just teeing up what I'll be talking about as well. I think a lot of it in terms of data clean rooms, there's some real basics. There's a few players that are more kind of sophisticated or mature, if you like, when it comes to clean rooms. So they are moving further ahead with more kind of interesting sounding. I shouldn't qualify it that way, but it's all interesting. You know, some kind of AI and ML type of use cases. But I think there's some basics that a lot of people are working on. But yeah, I'll definitely dive a bit more into that too.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I think Priya hits on a key thing there. Always relevant is cleanliness, standardization of data. Good practices are just baseline. I know we're working on it constantly. I'm sure, Priya, you've always, you know, that's just always at the forefront of anything we're doing.
That's right.
Very good. Well, let's give Jeff. Let's give you a chance to share a bit about out of your own experience. Yeah, why don't you tell us about the work you've been doing?
Yeah, so you know we can dive right in. You know, as I mentioned, it's no surprise, guys. It's AI. We tied it very closely to our strategy at Cisco for marketing. And while AI, like any other tech itself, is not a strategy, it certainly is enabling a whole new outlook for what marketing strategy can be, especially as we look to the intermediate and longer term horizons. And so, of course, we're spending a lot of time from a strategic framing standpoint, thinking a lot about our operating model, really thinking about what does marketing do? How do we do it with AI in the mix? You know, the first big question that I'm thinking a lot about often is sort of what is the role of marketing and go-to-market with AI? I think that we're going to see that marketing is going to have an outsized role to play in the revenue function going forward. The CMO owns and controls a huge swath of customer data and most of the endpoint systems that customers engage with. That is going to be the heart of AI as we think about AI inside of the revenue engine. And it puts the CMO in a unique position to really kind of help drive what the vision of go-to-market will be. This means that marketing strategy then really has to expand beyond sort of the traditional four walls of marketing and think about how do we use that data? How do we use our touch points and our knowledge of our customers to facilitate and support that broader revenue mission across the entire customer lifecycle? So I think that we're really starting to think about how do we reframe marketing in a lot of ways, because we are the stewards and arbiters of a lot of that data and those customer engagement points that AI is going to show up into. And this is going to be a long transformation. I think that it's not going to be a light switch like, oh, ChatGPT happened and therefore the world's different, you know, in a day. So we're spending a lot of time thinking about our priorities and sort of what does that journey look like step by step? Which use cases make sense for our organization based upon the available technology? What's our own org's maturity and readiness to adopt these things and really start to play those different roles? And frankly, you know, what are the areas that have the greatest strategic impact for us now? You know, for example, you know, we're working a lot on just the content supply chain. That is just some very low-hanging fruit with AI right now. Generative capabilities offer some very tangible wins that can quickly help us increase our campaign scale without stretching our resources any further. You know, we're just able to do a lot more with the budget available. And of course, to support all of this, we've got to think about systems and data, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But underlying all of this, we really do have to think about marketing's technical footing and where we're headed there. That said, good strategy is not just going to be about our operating model considerations, especially with something like AI. At Cisco, we're spending a fair bit of energy as an entire company at our enterprise level, thinking about how we responsibly adopt AI. Ensure that we are protecting our customers, our partners, and our people by putting the right guardrails in place, the right security and controls over that data, and ensuring that we have good governance baked into ourselves as a culture as we think about AI and its evolving role in the company. And obviously culture is the other big one there as we think about this. We are talking about true foundational changes to how marketing will operate and behave over time. So we really do have to think long and hard about our people and our culture. How will AI change how marketing works is going to help us define how do we help manage this change? How do we help enable and empower our people to operate and live in a world where they are working with AI and often managing AI much like a member of their team? So we're really thinking also, how do we foundationally change how we think about and enable our people so that we can actually affect this transition and not just, kind of hit a wall at some point where it doesn't work with our people. So if we go to the next slide, I'm going to talk very briefly sort of at the how are we doing some of this layer and thinking about from an organizational perspective how we're driving the strategy forward, and then we'll get into the tech, the more exciting guts of it all. But one thing we realized very early on is if we're going to make this big transformation, we are going to have to think and operate a bit differently, even from a strategic perspective. And so we're really leaning into this and actually structuring ourselves as an organization properly to capitalize on this opportunity. So one of the very first things that I did as I came into this role was work with our senior marketing leaders to develop and deploy an organizational structure to really kind of govern, guide, and accelerate AI adoption in our organization. We've kind of focused this as a system that allows us both for top-down control to help drive priorities, but also a bottoms-up motion to foster innovation, since we know a lot of the opportunities for AI are going to come from our front lines and their day-to-day needs. The people sitting closest to our customers, closest to the actual creation of our data. And so what we've done to really help facilitate all of this is develop a function that we call the Marketing AI Office, which acts sort of as a strategic clearinghouse and an incubator for our AI efforts. They really are focused on helping to build the business case and justify strategically which AI solutions we should be focusing on. They help align our resources to actually support and guide adoption. And they also act as the governing body to really make sure that our AI usage is compliant and responsible, that data access is being controlled, that it's properly introduced into our teams without making too many waves. And most importantly, though, they act as sort of a project and product management function. So they're actually the ones who are hands-on helping drive the progression of these AI technologies and adoption into our organization. The other thing that we're doing in marketing right now that's a little bit different is we're really aiming to become a more technical organization in a lot of ways, kind of stretching beyond sort of the traditional marketing operations sort of boundaries that are kind of usually in place for helping support demand gen and marketing. And so what we've done is essentially create a product function inside of marketing that is focused solely on developing domain-specific AI products. It's a bit new for sort of how marketing works, but what we're finding is that we're unlocking something we're calling that edge innovation. We still have IT building our major platforms, things like on our website, the large cross-enterprise systems that we're going to rely on and utilize as a marketing function. And obviously, we have plenty of vendor partners who are innovating and bringing really amazing solutions to market. But what we're finding is this is giving us a new level of agility to go build point solutions with AI on top of our data for our specific needs without having to go and just buy everything from the market or go beg and plead IT to go dedicate more resources to smaller priorities when we obviously have plenty of big things for them to go tackle. So it's really unlocking our ability as a function to innovate and to really take AI and hone it to our unique teams and our unique needs and our data. So I just want to kind of help frame that a little bit on how we're approaching AI before we dive into the next slide now, which is really, let's talk about the systems, the tech of Martechify on all of this. So, framing out these considerations from the strategic piece, all of that needs to have the right underlying foundations in an infrastructure and a data perspective. And I can tell you, we have learned a lot as we started to tackle this from AI perspective and are continuing to learn a lot. So I'm going to just share a few highlights from our journey thus far. On the infrastructure side, I cannot stress it enough. Probably everybody's going to get tired of hearing me about this at this point, but unified data is the key. That data has to be accessible. It has to be usable for AI to really be functional for a marketing organization. And marketing has a lot of data to bring together. My engineering team maintains over 150 data pipelines each day that we're running to bring all of our different enterprise and marketing and go-to-market touchpoint data together, process it, we prep it, and then we host it all inside of a data lake in Snowflake to make it easily accessible across our teams and our use cases. We're also building a lot of this on a hybrid cloud approach. We built a kind of award-winning developer space that's called Phoenix that is built with flexibility in mind. We use public cloud offerings quite a bit, Google Cloud, Azure, They have a vast model library of LLMs out there, some really powerful data infrastructure that they provide. We're pairing that with some of our other core systems like Snowflake to really kind of get the best of the ecosystem out there from our public providers. However, Cisco is also a leading infrastructure company, so we get to have access to some very cool private cloud capabilities. We leverage that infrastructure to host a lot of open source solutions to run customized workloads, really tailored systems that maybe are sometimes faster, lower cost, designed for our specific needs. We're starting to feed our applications when we look at it and we're like, hey, this thing needs to run faster. We're not going to pull our data from Snowflake. Let's shift this to a Postgres or a Redis for more in-memory, fast application access. So it's really given us quite a bit of flexibility in how we design these solutions for marketing. And the other thing we're really excited about right now is we're just starting to get our hands on some of Cisco's AI pods technology, deploying clusters of NVIDIA GPUs. So we're starting to train and design our own models to really fine tune and hone in again on our data, our needs. So that's where we're getting a lot of that organizational agility, is the broader sort of hybrid cloud application of our infrastructure. And obviously, as we think about data moving towards AI, we have to talk about a RAG strategy. What is our vector database model? Since traditional data structures just are not, really tuned to helping AI be really flexible and agile. And so we've anchored personally around Weaviate quite a bit. We like that open source platform. It's very large, very scalable, easy to deploy across much of that sort of, again, that private cloud infrastructure. And have built sort of a federated RAG model that's really designed for access in mind. We have multiple API endpoints. We're building data-specific agents on top of our RAGs. And that allows us to easily partner with other organizations and share our data, but also gives us a lot more control over that data and the access permissions of it, rather than just tables that are copied and pasted or shifted from one warehouse to the next. And so as we think past the infrastructure, though, we also then have the data practices to keep in mind. And what we're finding here is this is very important to drive AI forward. Documentation, having the data is one thing. Making the data understandable and accessible for AI is a whole other thing. We're finding that without documentation, having all those fields, putting them together, even if they're super clean, AI doesn't know what your data is. It doesn't understand the complexity of your systems. You have to put those layers of documentations. And so we built sort of what we call a semantic tree, from the field level to the data set to the dashboard, kind of traversing all the way across each level of our data to make sure the AI can understand what it is that it's working with. And that's allowing it to traverse this data a lot better and use it. Tied to that very closely is clean data schemas. Again, foundations matter. We're guilty. We have built more complex data sets than we need to, just because it makes it easier for dashboarding. Stacked data sets, but when you have multiple stacked data sets there instead of clean star schemas, AI gets confused very fast. So making sure that as you're thinking about how AI approaches your data and works across it, making sure that your schema systems are very clean and well documented is incredibly important. And the other thing that's very interesting that we're finding is, with all the wealth of data, especially as we think about things like unstructured content, there's a ton of value to AI, not just acting as an endpoint system to enable process or engagement, but also as an internal system to help actually make sense of that data and prepare it for other AIs to use. So we're investing a lot of time and energy into AI pre-processing to help us cleanse data, enhance data, generate a lot of metadata to help provide that documentation and semantic guidance for AI engines. So there's a lot of value for the more technologically focused members in marketing to be thinking about, how does AI help me in my job so that I can then enable AI to go do its job. So those are just some of the highlights that we've definitely found in our journey. There's a lot changing in the marketing data world, and I think that, I'm going to hand it off to Priya now, some of the amazing work she's doing, but you can see at the heart of it all, it is still about good data and data access.
Thank you, Jeff. Super good. Want to remind all the participants that we have a chat channel open, Q&A. So we've covered now a few technical aspects that I bet there's going to be questions. Please pop them into the chat, And as we get toward the end, we'll pull those into the conversation. But for now, I think let's move ahead with Priya. Love to hear your insights and your experience, Priya.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you. So we can move to the first slide, please. I'd love to spend some time talking today about data clean rooms. And I think the commonality here is like there's a lot of emphasis on data and data hygiene and making sure it's in good shape before you can actually do something with it. I'd like to focus on a data platform, namely data clean rooms, and the ways in which data clean rooms are supporting ad tech and martech use cases. So I've kind of highlighted here a few things that I think have been pretty influential in contributing to the rise of data clean rooms and why they're important in this industry, and also how it answers some of the problems that exist within our industry today. So one of the really big ones is regulation. So I think for this audience, we understand things like CCPA, GDPR, and some of these really big regulations in place. That means that as a technology team or company, that there is an obligation for us to build products and technologies that respect these regulations. We're living in a climate where consumers are becoming very savvy about what data is out there about them. The fact that they want to have some transparency and some say in what happens with their data. And so with that trend in the market that kind of leads to these regulations, the technologies need to be able to respect that. So that's one piece of it. Another piece of it is that it's not, I think that it's more than likely that we'll continue to get more regulation. It's going to continue to evolve. I wouldn't be particularly surprised if it becomes stricter. And then there's another dimension where it's not just at a federal level, it's also at a state level. States are coming out with their individual regulations. So all of that to say that the technologies that we're working with need to be able to be flexible to account for these new regulations as they're coming out. And for me, it has to be, a privacy-led conversation. When we're talking about data, privacy has to go hand in hand. It's table stakes, and so we just need to be keeping on top of that. Another area that I think is of interest in driving the demand for clean rooms is the conditions that marketing leadership and marketing teams are working under from an ad tech and martech perspective, and that's ROI, which we've known about this. This is nothing new, but I think that there are certainly, we're working in a very complex environment currently. There's economic uncertainty. The way that consumers are purchasing is changing. They might change their habits based on pricing fluctuations. And there can be like heavy influence from social media that wasn't there in previous years. And so I think that's really getting marketers to think about what the engagement strategies are, how that might need to change with the complex environment that we have, that we're faced with currently. So take that with the need to prove ROI and the increasing scrutiny there, with also the evolving regulatory environment. That really means that the market was ripe for something like data clean rooms, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail shortly. The other really big thing that I think has contributed is this trend with data collaboration. So in the recent few years, companies have started to see data as a strategic asset more now than ever. I think with the lots in the last 2.5 years with ChatGPT and AI, it's become very obvious that data is a strategic asset, but I've always viewed it as one. And companies and enterprises are trying to monetize their first-party data. Going a step forward from that, you can definitely, monetize your first-party data, but then adding additional data sets to your own existing data set, it really just gives you a more holistic, comprehensive, and nuanced view of who your consumer is, which, in marketing and martech and ad tech, that's really important. You want to get very personalized with who you're targeting, because what that leads into is essentially that you are, providing valuable messages at the right time, right person, right channel, that people like to consume media, and that it's a good consumer experience in the end. So there's a really good case for data collaboration, and it's a very common way of operating today. And the clean room provides an environment that can speak to all of these gaps and problems in our current environment, and it does it all in a privacy safe way. So if we could move to the next slide, please. Great. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about some practical application of my experience with data clean rooms and building them for multiple companies. So I'll start with a quick definition. What is a clean room? A clean room is simply a secure environment where two or more parties can come together, collaborate on their data, run analytics on that data, and get insights from that data in an aggregated way without revealing personally identifiable information, or PII. So it's a place, as I alluded to, that you can do all these more simple and more sophisticated analytics in a privacy safe way, which is again a really fundamental way of operating. So thinking about my particular experience, I mean, there's so many, things that there are areas to cover, but I picked on just a couple that I think are important. Product market fit, I thought, was really an interesting and important area that we needed to cover. And that's because the nice thing is over the last 2 to 3 years, data clean room vendors or partners that are out there have improved and enhanced their technology such that it's quite interoperable now. So in the beginning, that wasn't necessarily the case. However, even though a lot of players are interoperable with each other, I think it's still a really good conversation to have with your clients about aligning your tech stacks, right? Like, which data clean room providers do they want to work with? Do they not potentially want to work with? What region is the data sitting? Does one party need to change the region that their data is sitting? So these really kind of like practical logistical things that need to happen. But it's just it's a feasibility conversation, and also roadmap and prioritization conversation, because everybody's super excited about clean rooms, and for really good reason. But you just need to have these kind of basic fundamental conversations to make sure, hey, how well are we aligned? Also, there's conversations around, do both teams have their data in good shape, like we've been talking about? Do you have the technical resource to put behind it? And so what that really leads to is just making sure there's no blockers. And if there are, what are those workarounds going to be? And ultimately, where do you prioritize your integrations and your partnerships, and then the timing and resource allocation and all that really good stuff? So just some like basics that it's good to kind of good to get into place. So into the more fun stuff, I think, is just kind of talking a bit about the use cases that I had the opportunity to be focusing on in Martech and AdTech. So the first one is identity matching. So this is where in advertising in particular, it all trickles down from here, because it's really a matter of kind of data quality and fidelity and kind of how that trickles down into the effectiveness of your campaign. But in the clean room context, so, companies, they can have their own identity graphs, some don't. But what's happened historically is that you would take your identity graph, you would send it out to a third-party provider, and a third-party provider would take your identity graph with your partners and do the matching on your behalf. What that means is, it has many implications. You're sending your data out, so there's kind of potential issues around that, like data loss. There's latency considerations that takes time. It could take weeks at a time. There's obviously cost implications, and in some instances, there's quality implications in terms of the data matching and the match rates. So today you can use data clean rooms and you can do that identity matching within your own environment. And so of course that means it can be done quicker, it can be done with less cost, and in many instances there are higher match rates. And the reason that's important is that you're overlapping your identity graphs to see what overlaps do you have or not in some cases if you're trying to target new customers. But if you have a higher match rate, that means that you have a larger audience to be able to target, which means that your campaign should hopefully be more successful, and you're reaching more of your target audience. So that's really important and a really good value add. The next use case is audience custom planning. So this is really powerful because publishers, retail media companies, and others, they all have proprietary data that only they have, right? So, for example, viewership data and how people are watching Max, or what genres they like to watch, what time of day, what type of content they're interested in, or what transactional data on the retail media side, what are people actually going ahead and buying. So these are really powerful data sets, and everything in between, like psychographic data, demographic data is a basic one. There's just so much information available, and so being able to take advantage in the clean room of building these targeted audiences is really powerful, because clean rooms are privacy protecting. I think it lends itself to enterprises wanting to collaborate on their data, because they know that value can be derived without exposing PII or sensitive data. So you can either bring in your data and join it with a partner, or you can just go in the clean room and take advantage of that proprietary data. Okay, and then next is measurement and attribution, massively important. I heard a lot about reach and frequency in terms of measurement and attribution, but also sales lift and incrementality. Those are really powerful metrics and analytics that help to show how effective is my campaign being. I mean, and in some instances with some of the more mature players in this space, basket analysis is I found really interesting. Like, if what products are people buying together, and what's the propensity of buying product A if somebody bought product B, and that starts getting into kind of the ML AI space. So there's really a long runway of what can be done in terms of analytics, including AI and ML, but I think there's a lot of players that are actually working on some more of the basic ones, which is the right way about it. And of course, attribution from an ROI perspective is incredibly crucial for everyone involved. And so I'll talk now about the platforms or technology, I should say, that we used. I've had experience with the Snowflake platform, and we used Habu as a orchestration layer and a UI, but essentially the underlying technology is Snowflake, and there's other partners out there too. But what we really liked, and what I think is, speaks to some of the industry forces and needs that we're seeing, is that the data that you're trying to extract value from doesn't leave your walls. It stays within your own environment. So without going into a ton of detail, you have your Snowflake environment, your partner has your Snowflake environment, your tables and your data sets stay within your respective environments, but you can run queries that access those data sets in their respective places that they live in, and then it can yield aggregated results, protecting PII, and deliver those results to the Snowflake environment that was agreed upon. So that's really, it's such a big advantage. And so then the other thing, and I'm just trying to keep within time and not go into too much detail, but the other thing we really liked is that, you can write queries as the clean room owner. Your partner can also write queries. But one of the things I really appreciate is that there's a move towards writing queries in natural language as opposed to having to write in SQL. So that really furthers the agenda of data democratization, which I'm a proponent of. And it means that non-technical folks can also write queries, be that a business analyst or a product manager. And it means that you can get to those powerful analytics sooner, because you're not potentially relying on a technical resource where there potentially is a bottleneck, and you can reduce time to value, which we're all interested in. And so you can agree beforehand what the queries are going to be, and there's definitely a lot of transparency within the platform to audit and see how people are using the data, and so forth. So really great technology, and really enabled a lot of use cases. And so moving on to best practices, in the interest of time, I'll just focus on compute, which I think was a newer area, because if you're not used to working with cloud platforms, I think compute is a newer concept, though again, with the advent of AI, it's become a more familiar term. Practically speaking, you're working with data sets and processing, and that has a compute cost associated with it. One of the things that I had worked on is putting together a set of metrics to help understand what direction compute was going in. So what I mean by that is tracking number of data sets, size of data sets, again, number and nature of queries being run, because that gives you visibility into what the compute is going to look like and what the cost is going to look like. That not only helps you to manage your costs, but also could factor into your potentially your commercialization strategy. So I think that's a really good one to keep an eye on. So I'll just stop there in terms of timing, and we can open it back up to the group.
Great, thank you, Priya. Hey, so we are running a little short on time. So let me just say we're gonna a few minutes before the hour, we're gonna give it back to Ekaterina to do a few wrap-up thoughts. If you have Q&A, if you'd like to stay on after the close, after the hour, and we'll leave the platform up, and we'll turn on the microphone. So let's allow, if you're interested, that folks can stay on after the main session for Q&A. But I would, before we go to wrap up, I'd like to just connect the dots, Priya and Jeff. Can I just get your thoughts? Like Priya, in what ways are you sharing? In what ways is the content that you're sharing? How does that connect with what Jeff's sharing? And Jeff, vice versa. The strategy pieces you laid out. How do the dots connect over into the kind of solutioning Priya's talking about? Can you share your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, with what Jeff has been talking about, super interesting and relevant, and kind of in terms of data cleanliness and hygiene. And I think it's, these are fundamental things that we need before we can do something else useful with that data. And I think, clean rooms is one type of platform, a very popular type of platform in the industries that we're in, to start applying that data and gaining insights from it and achieving some of those goals in campaigns and getting good campaign outcomes. So I think it's really important what Jeff's talking about, preparing data for more advanced use cases like AI, like some of the practical ones that are being used today.
Yeah, I think, from Priya's discussion, the thing that I really was, thinking a lot about as she was talking through this is the amount of importance around alignment as you think about how do you share data and how does data work outside of your four walls of a function of an organization. The amount of agreement, pre-thinking, hey, how does our data match up, is incredibly important. I mean, I can't even imagine, as you think about one large organization opening a clean room with another one, or a large data partner, the amount of alignment that has to go in there. But even just working with our partners in sales, thinking about, all right, well, how do we bring your data together with our data? How do we make sure AI doesn't get super confused? Are we structured properly? Do we master the same way? Are our standards aligning, even within the organization? But yeah, definitely Priya had me thinking, my God, as we think about how we share and align data across organizations, the amount of pre-work that goes into that, I have to imagine, is quite tremendous to be able to make sure that it all does come together nicely and work. So again, just I think it keeps coming back to your foundations, your fundamentals of your data. Is it well documented? Does it make sense? Is it usable? Any one of these more advanced applications, if you're building us on top of sand, that's just the reality, and you're going to find that it's really hard to keep those foundations solid as you build more and more on top of So,
Very
yeah,
great.
Very cool, powerful theme.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Super insights here. And yes, let's give it over to Ekaterina for a few wrap-up thoughts, and then we'll stay on for Q&A. But thank you very much. Super powerful insights today. Ekaterina,
Awesome.
back for you.
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much. So can we go to the next slide? As we're wrapping up, I'd like to announce our next event. So our next event is on May 14th, and it's going to be in-person event at our Grapevine office. So some marketing sponsors Martechify, and we will be hosting a really cool event involving marketing organizations adapting to the rise of Martech and advancing your career. So we will see how Martech helps organizations as well as people on a personal level to get ahead professionally. And then another announcement in fall, on September 17th, we'll talk about maximizing your Martech stack, unlocking more power within your existing budget. So after this session, we will send a recording to everyone, everybody who registered for the event. Please continue engaging on LinkedIn. Please keep checking our content, because we have not only forums, in-person and virtual events, as well as we have a lot of educational content on our website, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And with that, should we go to the Q&A section?
Yes, let's see what questions folks have, and Jeff and Priya, I hope you can stay on a few minutes to wrestle with those.
Perfect. A question for Jeff. What kinds of results are you seeing from using AI to prep and clean data as well as analyze it after? Can you give us a use case? So I know you addressed some of it, but if you want to dive deeper.
I think we've got a very interesting one. We developed an agent that, as we look at our core contact layer data and our account data, so a lot of that more firmographic structure, domain coverage is always a challenge, and it's one of those really important fields to allow you to actually get to account mastering as you work across multiple systems. And obviously, we have vendor solutions. We have some strong partners who come in and help provide us a lot of data. But we've always, as you look at this at a massive scale, hundreds of thousands, millions of accounts and contacts, the accuracy has always been, hey, yes, it's filled the field, but do we know if that's the right field? That company has 20 different domains associated to it. So one thing we did was we realized that to really properly fill these with confidence, we actually developed, part of our data team over in our operations org, developed a AI agent that actually partners and brings in that data from our partner organizations, but actually then goes out and performs an AI-led web search and actually researches, hey, based on what we know about this company, does this domain look like the thing that this company should be talking about? And it's not a knock to any given data vendor out there, but I've seen instances of a tech reseller showing up with a domain that's actually a chicken shop in I think it was rural Louisville area. And it was just how the spellings had played out, whatever their mastering logic was. So this is where we are using AI to really go back, and we've seen a large increase in our confidence scores on those fills. And so therefore we've actually been able to maximize our fill rate and really shift large double-digit percentage swing in the ability to actually have reliable domains. Obviously, then that data pipes back into our systems, and we use those domains for all sorts of things: media targeting, other AI engines that are driving account insights. So that is where we are seeing a very clear knock-on effect of good pre-processing of data feeding back into our systems and our execution model.
Thank you. And then there's another question for you, Jeff. If you think about the speed of AI advancement, what should marketing teams in a mid-sized large company be investing in since they don't have large teams or other IT resources for support? Train up their existing team, leverage vendor experts, hire for specific skill. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I will say it always depends. That you'll never get a black and white answer from me. That's the joy of being a strategist. What I would say is, first of all, definitely sit down and think about your org's priorities. Where is the biggest opportunity to drive value for you with AI? Something like content generation is definitely low-hanging fruit. So there's an opportunity always to go to the vendors and find the vendors who have really honed their solutions and can work at your budget, your complexity level. That, though, the other part of that question, you 100% want to be working on upskilling your talent. And if you find that you do need specific needs for those needs, those broader use cases you want to go after, hey, I really do need somebody who's a little bit more, strong in data architecture, so that I can get that data together to better fuel even my third-party platforms. Hire for those. Hire to get those foundations in place for you to be able to drive your AI engine forward. But also, definitely think about, how do I upskill? How do all my people start to become AI ready, AI cognizant, so that you can bring in platforms and partners or vendors and have it actually fit and work. Because tech without good adoption just doesn't do much for you. It burns money. So that's a maybe non-answer, but also hopefully a good construct for how to get to the right answer.
Right. And thank you.
Just to add to that, from an upskilling perspective, there is a ton of resources out there that are available, that are free, that you not only theoretical from the Coursera's of the world or the LinkedIn's, but also there's places you can go to, go ahead and build a chatbot or automate a process. I mean, there's really a lot of resources out there.
And then there are also, little pitch for asset marketing, but there are a lot of great, collaborators out there too. If you find like you just need somebody to help you work through a given project or need, I think that there's a very strong emerging talent base out there for project level solutions. So that is always an option as well, to help augment your workforce without having to go hire specific talent that you maybe won't be able to feed work for the next 5 years, clearly or easily with.
Thank you, Jeff. We can talk about our Flex team strategy and support that Ascent offers. So there's a question for Priya. Do you have any AI regulations in place? Are they really different from data regulations?
Yeah. So I think that from an AI regulation standpoint, it's not an area that I'm deeply involved in or have been deeply involved in. I think that, but it's an area I've been thinking a lot about, and it is different from data because, broadly speaking, when it comes to data, you're using kind of the data. It's that's there. If it's deterministic, kind of what data is you're using, and it's a kind of linear line that probably isn't coming out quite what I mean. What I'm really talking about is when you're talking about AI algorithms, they use deterministic data and they use probabilistic data, and it produces an outcome. So I think one of the things I've been thinking about and reading about is the fact that when it comes to AI regulation, it's really important to have data lineage and understand a clear kind of transparency as to where that data came from, the source that it came from, how the decision was made as to the output that it's provided. And I think that goes a long way in understanding and regulating what the outputs of AI are.
Yeah, and just to add on that, I mean, EU AI Act is coming into force. As you think about something like a data clean room where you're talking about, hey, we're going to do analytics, we're going to potentially bring AI into this space, you're going to find that a lot of regulation is looking a lot at how AI is using the data. So what is your use? Things like, are you scoring people based upon their behavior to make certain kinds of decisions? Depending on your industry, if you're trying to get to a healthcare decision, a security decision, something, you're working with the police force or something, there is a lot of questions around how are you using the data. So Priya has definitely hit on what is the lineage, where does that data come from? There's a huge host of regulations around that. But with AI, it's going to be how are you starting to use that data, even if it is technically, private and aggregated. The actual outcomes of those AI use cases is going to be the part that you'll run into another layer of regulation that we haven't had to, have the same level of consideration around before. So it's going to make something like your data clean room strategy a whole, one extra thing to go in a line on with everybody as you walk into that. But then very powerful outcomes are available with it.
Perfect. So it sounds like these are the main questions that I saw in the chat, and I know we should probably wrap up pretty soon. So any final closing thoughts, Jeff, Priya, Rich?
My closing thought is thank you. This was really good today. Nice job of connecting the dots. And I certainly am coming away with new insights that we can apply. So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
The
you.
one
And
thing I'll say is, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, I know. Just thank you, Martechify, for having me on, and great working with you all and Jeff. And I've learned a lot today as well. So yeah, thank you.
I'll echo all that, guys. It's been really fun. Really enjoyed the conversation. My one takeaway for everybody on this is always get those fundamentals right. Your data has to be clean. It has to be usable. As you've heard today, the only way you get to cutting edge is you got to take that first step. You're not going to start running without walking. So thank you guys so much.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.